I still want to nail down on the exploitation bit because I don't believe it's exploitation in the way that you're defining it. Because part of the reason for my belief there is because a they choose to work at this company, and if the company was really exploiting them and not paying them fairly for their wages, they could move elsewhere. They could go elsewhere to find another organization. If you or I were at a business where they decided they wanted to pay you $10 an hour for your history expertise, you would rightly go elsewhere because that would be exploitative because you're worth a lot more than that. And so I don't think that I would agree that it is exploitative of um, employees at a company to give them a job and to offer them pay commensurate with their skill level.
Okay, yeah, so that is probably how a lot of Americans and people around the world believe. Certainly, people who think that capitalism is working well for most people. Um, I like to tackle this historically. So, in the 19th century, this would have been the main difference between a small R Republican, like Abraham Lincoln, perhaps, who became a big R Republican, and then also a communist, a small c communist like Marx. There was a lot of overlap in the 19th century between republicanism and communism. Republicanism was kind of like the radical ideology in the United States in the 19th century, and was against the notion of arbitrary power. That is, like, they were against slavery in the sense that it didn't offer individuals the sort of like freedom to move. It was sort of an arbitrary imposition on people. And that's why the slogan of the new Republican Party in the 1850s was free labor, free men, free soil. Um, whereas, and so like Marx was in favor of abolishing slavery and thought that it would be an improvement for workers, black workers, if they had like free access to a free labor market in that sense.
Hmm.
He was deeply opposed to slavery, but he saw labor as more on a spectrum. So he didn't think that labor in a capitalist setting was free necessarily. It's just it wasn't you didn't have sort of like arbitrary. So you weren't enslaved, you weren't chattel. That's obviously a massive improvement. But
Right.
he saw capitalism not as an arbitrary system, but as a sort of an impersonal system that nobody could really escape from. If you're a working class, you have to sell your labor in order to survive. And he sort of saw things systemically as exploitative. So you might have like a fair boss who wants to pay their workers fairly, but the system itself required that that person, if they owned a factory or if they owned some sort of capital, the system required that they had to, like, in order to survive as a capitalist, they have to make a profit. And Marx believed that the sort of way in which you make profit in the sort of grand scheme of things was to better figure out ways to exploit your labor force. Um,
Mm.
and so, like, Marx and those who are critical of capitalism as being not exactly a sort of not exactly freedom, are critical of it in the sense that, like, people don't really have a choice. If they if they want to survive, they have to sell their labor under these conditions of like inequality. So it's not, so a Marxist wouldn't think like agreeing to a job was like a free and equal exchange, like a contract. And that's like the biggest difference. I'm probably not going to convince you of that argument, but that would be the biggest sort of difference of understanding in terms of thinking about capitalism. Like, um, I like if my university, so I'm not oppressed. I do not feel like I'm an exploited person. But I can use my own personal example here. If my university decided to fire me, and I'm fairly well protected with tenure, but we've seen lots of tenure professors fired over the course of the history of tenure, which is not that old, and especially lately. If they decided to fire me as a historian, I probably couldn't get a job elsewhere, at least not one that would pay me anywhere near fairly. And so, like, I'm protected right now, and I guess you might say, relative to lots of people who have to sell their labor, I'm relatively privileged, and I'm quite happy about that. It's one of the reasons why I earned a PhD. But if I didn't have this tenure protected job, I would be out there in conditions that, like, it probably would be impossible for me to make a living as a historian. Um, so then I'd be sort of subject to, like, what am I going to do? What else am I skilled to do? Well, in grad school I attended bar. So I guess I could do that, but like, and I might have to, because I have a family, I have children I have to raise.
Right.
I guess most people who aren't PhDs and don't have tenure like I do, um, they just don't work under the same sort of, like, conditions, and like, most people have to sell their labor under conditions that are less than desirable. And so, like, this is one of the
Mm.
reasons why Marxism has remained relevant for lots of Americans across the history of American capitalism. So, like, Americans, at a philosophical and at a personal level, have long been obsessed with the concept of freedom, probably more than any other national history. Um, and there's like a rich tradition of thought about freedom in the American context. And it's one of the reasons I was attracted to intellectual history, is because there is this rich history there. But one aspect that the American traditions, for the most part, have kind of ignored or missed out on is something that it's a gap that Marx fills and Marxism fills, and that is, like, so in a capitalist society, we spend so much of our time at work, like we have to, and we're not really free at work. Like, we don't, when you're at work, you don't have free speech rights, most people. When you're at work, you don't have free mobility rights. Like, in the United States, because employment is often connected to or conditioned to health insurance, you don't actually have free mobility, because, like, oftentimes leaving your job means losing health insurance. This is an aspect that of, like, freedom, like enhancing freedom, that most American political and intellectual traditions kind of ignore. It's one reason why C. Wright Mills, who was this great 20th century intellectual, it's one reason why he argued that Marx actually extended 19th century liberalism to the working class. He was more liberal than liberals.
Hmm. Yeah, the freedom thing is interesting because I think that oftentimes people mistake safety. Well, they want safety and freedom. I don't know that you can have both of those together. If you are free, then you are also, if you're free to start your own business, do whatever you want, you're also free to accidentally crash and burn. And if you're safe, then you're not. If you're safe, you're strapped into your car seat, then you're not free. So I think that those two, safety and freedom, often stand at juxtaposition, but I think that both are necessary. And I would disagree with the free speech part on the that you mentioned, that people don't have freedom of speech where they work. If that is the case, I would recommend that they leave that job and go find somewhere else they can work. Um, because I think that the magic of um, the magic of capitalism is because it's run by individuals and not by a government who um, mandates that these are the free speech codes that you must follow, or these are the other laws that you must abide by. If I don't like working for this person, I can go work for this person over here, and this person over here might be much more reasonable. They might agree with the things that I'm saying, and they might want to, pay me. It may end up being that they pay me less over here, but it's something that I enjoy, a place that I enjoy working at. And so I don't know that I would agree that that is. I think freedom and safety are. You can't have all freedom and all safety.
Is this an argument against seatbelts? No, I'm kidding. I mean, so the sort of Marxist conception of freedom, and this is also a social democratic conception of freedom that FDR elaborated on in the middle of the 20th century, is that you can't actually have freedom without some degree of security. Like if people don't have economic security, it's really hard to imagine that they have freedom or the ability to obtain conditions under which they can flourish. Freedom is
Right.
like freedom from my perspective is like somebody who has conditions under which they can flourish. And I just don't believe that people have the sort of ability, or like everybody has the ability to sort of find and create their own conditions to flourish. The conditions to flourish is a social thing. It's a societal thing. It's not something that individuals can create for themselves, or most individuals. A few lucky ones, of course, can. And it's usually the few lucky ones who sort of are like become representative of society in ways that I think are deeply ideological, but most people cannot create their own conditions for flourishment. These are sort of like embedded in our society.
What do you mean by flourishment in that sense?
I have a very Marxist sense of flourishment. Like Marx believed that everybody can offer something unique to everybody can offer something unique to society. Everybody is an individual, but that the conditions for offering that unique thing, like our unique talents, who we are as individuals, is deeply, deeply constrained by various historical patterns and structures. And so his whole life mission was to sort of think through history in ways that we as humans might come together and organize our way out of these patterns of patterns of exploitation, like a pattern of social norms that are exploitative. Um, like Marx is often misunderstood, I think, by lots of people, conservatives, liberals, like anyone who I think has not really grappled with Marx in serious and sustained fashion is often assumed like he's anti-individual. I consider him one of the great philosophers of individualism of the 19th
Hmm.
century, because he firmly believed that individuals were unique and uniquely capable and could offer something, but that the sort of conditions for individualism were part of a larger sort of like social fabric. And so the social fabric has to improve if individuals can flourish, can be free to be their full selves.
I would agree that the social fabric needs to change. I don't think that what we have going for us right now is optimal. I think that in many ways, I'm sure you've seen the graph of the um, rent prices or house prices, and then the going up steeply and wages remaining somewhat the same. But I would actually tie a lot of this. Um, I don't know if I would use the word exploitation, but a lot of the economic problems to an overreach in government as opposed to innately systemic in capitalism.